You're watching BCTV. We're all about Brantford. You're watching BCTV, Brantford Government Television, a service of Brantford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Brantford.
Good evening. We'll call this meeting of the Brantford Planning Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, September 2nd. I have 7:02 p.m. I'll introduce members of the commission and staff this evening. To my far right, we have Commission Member John Lust. Next to John, Commission Member Joe Chadwick. Next to Joe, turning the corner, we have Joe Viuzzo. Next to Joe Viuzzo is Fred Russo. To my left, we have Commission Member Marcy Pelusi. Our staff this evening is our town planner, Harry Smith, and next to Harry is our assistant planner, Evan Brining, and I believe we have our zoning enforcement officer, Dylan Willett, with us this evening as well. I'm Chuck Anders, chair, and we'll begin by asking our secretary to read the notice of public hearing.
The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Brantford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of public hearings to be held on Thursday, September 2nd, 2021 at 7 p.m. in person at the Brantford Fire Headquarters, 45 North Main Street, Brantford, Connecticut, to consider the following. 1. Application number 21-6.9, special exception modification for a multifamily dwelling located at 4-3 Elm Road, ALMR LLC, care of David D. Attree, applicant and owner. Item number 2, application number 21-7.1, special exception for an accessory apartment located at 11 Circle Drive, Leopoldo Otero, applicant, Jasmine Vargas, owner. Item number 3, application number 21-7.4, special exception for a car wash located at 54 and 60 North Main Street, Nick Magnata, applicant, and John and Rachel Brazili, care of attorney Joseph Porto, owners. Item number 4, application number 21-7.5, special exception and coastal site plan for the demolition and reconstruction of a cottage located at 12 Sunrise Cove Camp, Robert Calderella, applicant, Pamela Everett, owner. Item number 5, 21-7.2, special exception for grading for a single-family residence located at 8 High Plains Road, Demi Capobianco, applicant and owner. At said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard and written communications will be received. A copy of the application is on file in the Planning and Zoning Commissioner's office at the Planning and Zoning Department, 1019 Main Street, Brantford.
Thank you, Marcy. We'll follow our normal format for public hearings. That means the applicant goes first. Come forward. We have microphones over here. You state your name, make your presentation. If you have any consultants, they can make their presentation. After that, we turn it over to the commission members and staff. We'll have a summary of the staff report, open up for questions, comments by commission members. At that point, we'll open it up to the public, and we'll ask that you come forward, grab a microphone, state your name and address for the record, make your comments. After the public is completed, the applicant will have a chance to respond to public comments. We may or may not complete the public hearing depending on how it goes, since it's not unusual to have continuances. With that, we'll start with we have copies of the agenda and staff reports up here, if anyone would like those. We'll start with our first item. Our first public hearing item is Sayed Sami, Oil Baron Inc., Robert Harmon. This is 49 Leeds Island Road, a special exception modification, expansion of a convenience store. My understanding, Harry, is that there's still additional information on this one and that we're going to continue this matter to our next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Sammy granted an additional extension to us, also supplied the outstanding materials, so we should have him on the next meeting.
Okay, so if you're here for the first item, this matter, I think we already opened the public hearing, but we're going to continue that one to our next meeting, which is on September 16th. That brings us into item number 2. I think we have a similar story for this one. This is the ALMR Inc., David Attree, applicant and owner, 4-3 Elm Road, special exception modification for multifamily dwelling. And I understand that it turns out this applicant needs a variance, so it's not really ready to open. Is that correct, Harry?
Yes, that's correct. Harry's the town planner. So the ZBA meeting will be on the 21st of this month. So Planning and Zoning Commission's next meeting after that would be the 7th of October, and I believe we received a time extension to allow the public hearing to be open tonight, and we're probably not open tonight, and just leave it and table that item to the 7th.
Okay, so if you're here for this item, this is the 4-3 Elm Road. We're not going to open the public hearing on that one. That was because they have to get an application, have to get a variance before they can move forward. And so we expect that's going to, we'll table that and open the public hearing on October 7th. That brings us then to item number 3, which is Leopoldo Otero, Jasmine Vargas owner, 11 Circle Drive, a special exception for an accessory apartment. Is the applicant prepared to go forward?
My name is Leopoldo Otero, and I have my contractor, which he could give more explanation of what's going to be done and what we're applying for.
Yes, maybe speak a little bit closer to the mic so we can hear you. Just think.
My name is Leopoldo Otero, and I have my contractor here that he could explain more of what's going to be doing on the property, and he could explain better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Otero. Your contractor wish to speak? Can you either grab a microphone or speak over there at the podium,
Either way you'd like to do it,
better.
yeah.
My name is Leo Bertrand. I'm the general contractor, and we're converting a garage to a living space, and we just need the approval. We submit all the paper already to the town. If you have any questions?
Okay, so you've submitted it's a converting garage to living space.
Yes, we have the blueprint too.
Okay, we have the plans here. Maybe what we'll do is we'll ask our assistant planner to review the staff report with us.
Sure. This proposal consists of a new accessory apartment built mostly within the existing footprint of the single-family home, along with a small addition to the rear of the structure. They are located in the R4 district, and the apartment includes a bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and a living room. They meet all the bulk standards of the R4 district. They did not supply a landscaping plan. However, the changes to the site are minimal. They meet the parking requirements, and the applicant meets the general requirements of section 7.4, accessory apartments. However, staff would like the applicant to confirm the square footage of the accessory apartment. Based on the application materials, it appears that the special exception criteria are generally satisfied. Staff recommends one finding, subject to compliance with the conditions listed below. The commission, based on the testimony and application, the proposed use of the property is consistent with the special exception criteria of section 9.8. With one condition: prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, the owner must file a deed restriction on the land record, requiring that the unit, if rented, be rented at or below prices that would qualify it for an accessory, for an affordable housing, or as affordable housing.
Thank you, Evan. So there was one question. I don't know if do you know what is the square footage of the proposed?
24 by 32.
24 by 32. So if someone could do the math, we can figure that out, right? Does that, I assume, Evan, you're asking to ensure that it comes within the regulations.
768.
Which is less than 900, so.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
so you're
less than
good.
900.
Okay, we
There you
just wanted to confirm that. Questions from commission members or staff?
So is it intended to be rented? I'm just curious if it's intended to be used as a rental unit or a family.
Thank you, Marcy. Any other questions from commission members or staff? Let's open it up to the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? One more time, does any member of the public wish to comment? Seeing none, do you have any further comments? Any further comments from the applicant or staff or the commission? Okay. Okay, this seems something that we can probably take care of later on after we complete our public hearings. And you can leave if you like, or you can stick around and call tomorrow, and we'll let you know what happened. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that brings us then to item number 4, which is Dimai Capabiance, massacre that, 8 High Plains Road, a special exception for grading. And is an applicant here on that one?
Yes.
They couldn't pronunciate the last name. Is that Nolan?
Tom Capabianco. I'm here with my daughter Demi and Paul Stoll, my A2 surveyor on the property. We had gotten clearance through the inlet for the Wetlands Commission, and now we were told to be here present for fill that we had brought in. We had taken trees down and brought 416 yards of fill in the backyard to grade the backyard because there basically wasn't a backyard that was useful. In doing so, I guess it's part of the process for her to be here, so which is why we are present. And so far, we've done everything that we've been asked to do. And I just wanted to state, when we actually had taken trees down, there was, at the time, my wife was actually at the town hall, said we bought this property, and we wanted to take trees down. And they said, as long as they're on your property, you could take trees down. Little did we know, just past the boundary, there was 69 square feet that our soil surveyor found some wetlands and said, guess what, you're within 100 feet, even though it's on your boundary, so you're just gonna have to spend some money and take care of this problem. So we've done everything we've had to do. The 416 yards of fill, no different. We took the trees down that had $40,000 damages due to the last storm we had last August. So they had damage. I put a new roof on. These trees were all hovering around the house, so we had taken them down. They had been there for a long time, there was nothing intended, nothing that we were doing that we thought we were actually, that it would actually go to where we are today. We had no idea. So we actually found out the hard way. So we are here, so whatever else needs to be addressed. Paul, my surveyor, is here, who's done the A2 survey, and soil scientist had an additional company, and we have additional trees that have to get planted, so we're going to go through that process also.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Evan, did you do the staff report on this one?
I did. Like Mr. Capobianco said, this is a special exception for grading within 100 feet of an inland wetland. The applicant regraded and removed vegetation from the area surrounding 69 square feet of wetland. They had recently received a zoning permit to extend their deck in the backyard, as well as approval from the Inland Wetlands Commission for the regrading and the removal of trees. They meet all the bulk standards of the R5 district. They had previously installed silt fencing, marked the location of that silt fencing on the site plan, and one of the conditions of their inland wetland approval was silt fencing installed to the satisfaction of their wetland officer. A landscaping plan was not provided. However, they provided a planting plan for that inland wetland application. On that plan, they mark where the plantings will be in the area surrounding the actual wetlands, as well as a split rail fence. Based on the application materials, it seems that they satisfied these special exception criteria. Staff recommends 2 conditions prior to the issuance of a zoning permit. All conditions of the approval from the Inland Wetlands Commission from August 16th shall be met, and an as-built survey shall be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Department showing the limits of vegetation, location of any significant trees, revised regrading, installation of plantings, and the location of the split rail fence.
Thank you, Evan. Questions from commission members or staff? Marcy?
This plan recommends green arborvitae, but the plant list for the shrubs and trees is on the survey is, in my opinion, as a landscape architect, much more appropriate for the area. So I'm just curious if they're adding additional arborvitae to screen the backyard from the wetlands, or because in my mind, unless wetlands is a requirement, I don't see the need for the arborvitae. I don't think they'll survive well there. I think the plans that they're proposing are appropriate. So I just wasn't sure what your intention was as far as what you wanted to see in the backyard beyond.
We wanted to, the arborvitae was more something we wanted.
For screen and separation?
Yeah, because there was trees there, and we felt that with the neighbors in proximity, them feeling a little like, well, where all these trees going for 50 years.
So you have
we actually could see them, so we were doing arborvitae. The soil scientists that placed those specialty trees over there to get shade and so forth to cover that 69 square feet, that we're definitely doing. The arborvitae, he wanted a little more, and he has quite a few on there.
So you're looking to create a screen. I would just try to keep them as upland as you can so that they can grow for you, give you the
privacy for everybody else. And where those are, they're not even in the wetlands. I mean, they're still within the 100 feet.
Yeah.
But they're more physically,
Okay.
just making the neighborhood a little more.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if that was a requirement from the wetlands or something. A few more dollars to get some privacy.
Any further questions from commission members or staff? If not, then we'll open it up to the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? One more time, any member of the public wish to comment? Hearing none, does the applicant or staff or commission members have any further comments? Hearing none, then we'll close this matter as a public hearing. It's something likewise we'll probably take up in a little bit. You can stick around or you can call in tomorrow if you'd like. Okay. Thank you. That brings us then to item number 5 on our agenda. This is Nick Magnota, the applicant, John and Rachel Rocio, 54 and 60 North Main Street, special exception for a car wash. And I understand, Harry, that there was an additional fill permit or excavation fill permit that's needed with this as well. Is that correct? So the suggestion is that we simply open and continue this one?
Yeah, when Evan was reviewing it, he found out that they did not apply for a special exception that would be required under section 6.8, the grading and earth removal. So we have that already set up, and we have legal ad already in for the meeting on the 16th. But to catch the two parts of the application up together, we'd have to open and continue this public hearing without any testimony and start it all together on the 16th.
Okay. So if you hear on this item, this again is 54 and 60 North Main Street, we're going to simply open this and continue this to our next meeting, which is on September 16th. So that matter is continued. That brings us into our next item, which is item number 6, Robert Candelera, Pamela Everett, the owner. This is 12 Sunrise Cove Camp. This is a special exception coastal site plan for the demolition and rebuilding of a cottage. Mr. Preddy, I assume you're representing the applicant.
That's correct. I'm going to talk from here.
Good.
Good evening, everyone. Jim Preddy, Chris Golo Engineering here in Brantford. The application before you is to replace another cottage at Sunrise Cove Camp. There's been a number of these that have come before you over the last few years. This is at number 12. It is existing at, I think, it's less than 3 feet from the property line currently. The plan is to remove it and reconstruct it within the or outside of the 10-foot building setback, so we are eliminating a nonconformity on that side. We are here for special exception for grading within 100 feet of a coastal resource because we did go out, as you can see on that plan or the one in front of you, there is a rocky riprap slope that is basically the edge of the shoreline there, and we are within 100 feet of that. The only earthwork there is for the new foundation for the structure for the crawl space. We aren't actually doing any grade changes, so I sometimes wonder about that, the applicability of that in this kind of situation, but we applied for it anyway. And then the coastal site plan approval, because again, we were within 100 feet. The use is not changing. It's a cottage. It's going to be a cottage. So we believe that we are consistent with the coastal policies. We are providing erosion controls around the building that will be removed and replaced. There are already public utilities connected to the cottage, which will be reconnected to the new cottage. As Mr. Caldarella usually would do these, he's the president of the Sunrise Cove Association, but he was called away. He's on his way back from South Carolina at the moment and couldn't get here in time. I did have a conversation with Evan earlier today. We were asked about
we're asked about a couple of things. So when these applications have come before you, they've been partial site plans. Nobody's ever really had to do a complete survey of the whole property. It's 187,000 square feet approximately. So the question came up about coverage and floor area ratio. So what I did is the Sunrise Cove has their own building and design planning standards that are available online. They, at their own board, have already approved this, so it meets the standards that have been set forth regarding maximum footprint and height and that sort of thing. But what I did is took their standards and said, okay, well, if every one of these 36 cottages was maxed out according to their standards, what would the coverage and the floor area ratio be? And the floor area ratio would be 40.6%, where 50% is the zone maximum, and the coverage would be 14.3%, where 25 is the maximum. So this change really does not affect any of that. In fact, those numbers would be maximum. The reality of it is less. The other thing we looked at is their height requirements is 30 feet from first floor, which they do comply with. But the town of Brantford is 35 feet from average grade. So looking at average grade and adding the 35 feet, our height is actually 31.35. So we're well within the 35-foot height restriction, also in all the residential zones in Brantford. So again, this is a replacement of a structure that's there, very similar to many of the others that have been done. I do have some pictures. That I'll pass around. The whole aerial view of kind of the whole picture. The one being replaced is this one here. This other one next to it is actually on the other property. By that side. As you can see, some of them have already been enlarged and replaced over the years. It's one behind it, so I think the modification is up. Like this one. 51 is the guys. Okay, so that's this one. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What's the existing elevation of the finished floor now?
15.1.
Okay, so are you raising it above that for any flood
No, we're
consideration?
matching that floor. We're in the so we're actually out of the flood zone there.
Okay, and is it on, I know there's a lot of rock over there. Are you going to have to pin the foundation or anything, or do you
They're just
anticipate-
doing a shallow, a crawl space foundation, so they won't have to get very deep.
So they can get below frost and get the
Correct.
slab in? Okay.
Again, we did move it away from the property line to more than meet the 10-foot setback. We can't really go any farther because there is a sewer line on the other side of the structure.
Oh, I don't know. Are you adding square footage to what you have now?
The footprint is changing the foundation footprint is changing from 543 square feet to 680, 680, I think.
And is there going to be a second floor where there wasn't one, or is it, so they're keeping approximately the same footprint but adding a second floor?
Yes.
Okay.
They're, so the way they have it's kind of funny, but the first floor you could do 684, and then you go to the next floor and you go a little bit bigger, like with an overhang, but
Right.
And then there's restrictions on a third floor. So again, there is a third floor here, but it's more of loft or attic space because there's very little that's
in the-
more than 7 feet high here.
It's under the ridge, yeah.
It's under the eave, under the
Whatever the roof's going
rafters,
to be.
right?
Right.
So this is an R2 zone, and it's an existing nonconformity. How many dwellings are on the site?
There's 36 cottages.
But just to restate what you said, when you take the maximum of what's allowed under the Sunrise Cove, it's still in conformance with what the Brantford zone is.
Correct.
The only difference is this is just one more example of a small footprint going a little bit more vertical to get the living space because of, the limited area.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Anything else, Mr. Preddy?
That's it.
Okay. Evan, did you do the staff report on this?
I did. This application is for a special exception for grading within 100 feet of a critical coastal resource, as well as a coastal site plan. The activity, like Mr. Peretti just described, consists of demolition of a single-family dwelling and reconstruction to be repositioned to be compliant with the setback standards, along with the addition of a second story. This lot is not on an individual parcel, and as such, it's difficult to determine certain bulk standards like lot coverage and floor area. I think Mr. Peretti just covered those issues, but staff would like the applicant to confirm that no increase in an existing nonconformity would take place. The applicant did not provide an erosion and sediment control plan. However, he does indicate silt fencing on the site plan around where the proposed activity is to take place. No significant regrading is proposed. The commission would need to find that the measures proposed, to the extent that they are alternatives from those in the Connecticut DEP 2002 guidelines for soil erosion and sediment control, are acceptable. Based on the application materials, it appears that the special exception criteria are generally satisfied. Staff recommends 2 findings. The coastal site plan is consistent with the goal and policies of the Coastal Area Management Act. And number 2, subject to compliance with the conditions listed below, the commission finds, based on the testimony and application materials presented, that the proposed use of the property is consistent with the special exception criteria. We also recommend 3 conditions. Number 1, erosion control measures installed to the satisfaction of our zoning enforcement officer. Special exception approval shall expire 1 year from the date of this, the date of decision. And prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, the applicant shall demonstrate compliance with Chapter 161 of the Town of Brantford's Code of Ordinances to the satisfaction of the town engineer.
Thank you, Evan. So you asked that the applicant confirm that there's no increase in any existing nonconformities. Is that your testimony here, or?
I believe we're not adding any structures. There is 36. There remains 36. That's not changing. There is a side setback that is a nonconformity now that we're actually making conforming. I've gone over the floor area and coverage ratios, and we're well within those limits. We're well within the height limits. I don't believe that there are any nonconformities. I know because of, these couple of these developments are a little unique in town. I've actually, unrelated, I've actually been to at ZBA when these have been, this has come before them before, and they were basically told, "Why are you here?" They didn't believe that it was a variance required to replace an existing cottage unless there's a side or some sort of property line setback issue.
And the fact that the square footage, you said it went from 543 to 680, the footprint,
yes.
Footprint enlarged a bit. That's not an increase in nonconformity.
We believe not, because again, if you total the property, then it doesn't. We're well within the limits
for coverage.
Yes.
Okay.
So is it safe to assume that you took the available land, divided by the coverage allowance, and divide that by the total number of units to back into the number that would be allowed for this?
That's correct. But in fact, the number actually would get less because they did purchase a couple of other adjacent properties closer to the road, smaller properties that haven't been merged on the deed yet, but that would actually increase the size of the property and lower the percentages even more. But I didn't include those for this.
Was this originally some kind of planned? I mean, it must have predate zoning. Is that why?
I believe
yeah, okay.
The predate zoning.
I just, I wasn't sure if ZBA was considering it like a PUD or something because of the uniqueness of the area.
I think probably show our age here. Joe Valluzzo may remember this, or John, back in the 90s, that there was actually a proposal to create a separate zone for this, so you wouldn't have to come to get variances every time you did certain things, but I don't think it went anywhere. So, any questions from commission members before we open the public or staff? If not, then we'll open up the public. Any member of the public wish to comment? Yes, ma'am, please come forward. You can grab a mic and identify yourself.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. My name is Catherine Learned. I own property at both 51 and 53 Landfare Cove Association, the abutting property for this application. I am also a past president of the Landfare Cove Association. I've lived there for 30 years. My husband is a past president of the Landfare Cove Association. He is here with us this evening. He has lived in Landfare Cove Association for 78 years. I mention that because this, I think on the surface, looks like a rather pro forma application. I also think that the engineer has done a fine job of describing the specifics of the application, but I think there's more to be considered than what you've heard this evening. The reason I feel that way is because when I spent some time with the zoning regulations of the town of Brantford, I note that the very first page says that these regulations are adopted to, and I quote directly, number 9, give consideration to the character of each area and its peculiar, suitability for particular uses. Or 10, conserve the value of buildings and encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout Brantford. Or 11, protect historic factors and resources. These associations, both Sunrise Cove and Landfare Cove, were seasonal cottages. Landfare Cove started as a tent colony, but the hurricane in 1938 made that rather impractical. So those tents became platforms with sides and tops, and eventually they became small seasonal cottages. Somewhere along that time, Sunrise Cove, and I apologize, I don't know the exact history of the founding of Sunrise Cove, but it was very similar in character. So most of the people who live in Landfare Cove grew up with kids who grew up in Sunrise Cove, in these little camps that had none of the amenities of year-round structures. I'm not sure when that changed, but it's been probably about 25 years when Sunrise Cove made the determination to go year-round and build much, much more substantial structures. I'll be candid. At Landfare, sometimes we call it Malibu, because in fact these structures are so crowded into the shoreline and they are so oversized, particularly the 3-story ones, that they look like mansions perched on the side of the water. Ours are still very much conforming. We have 84 cottages in Landfare Cove, and the engineer quite eloquently again spoke of the fact that Sunrise Cove has its conforming standards for buildings. So do we. Ours require no more than 14 feet to the ridgepole, from the floor to the ridgepole. So even though many of our cottages have been rebuilt, we've maintained a scale and a massing that is very, very consistent. That has not been true of Sunrise. Then we look at this particular cottage, which literally, and I do have photographs with me, which literally is cheek to jowl with cottage 51. Let me offer these to the chair.
Sure. Okay. Are these copies?
Yes, they're for you.
Okay. We'll just.
So,
Are these different ones? Okay.
these cottages are so close to 51 or to 50 or to 53, our 2 cottages, that literally, if the occupant of this cottage were to sneeze in the middle of the night, I would say Gesundheit, because that's how close we live to each other. When this cottage goes up, even with a 10-foot setback, it will loom over our cottages. It will change everything. We will now be we will be uncomfortable. It will feel very weird. It will cast a shadow. It is a very, very different massing. And certainly in land use and structures in a community, massing is very important. You asked very thoughtful questions about the difference in the floor square footages. But once you put three of those together, first, second, and third floor, you start to get a very, very different structure. And you see that in those. One of those pictures, actually, I drew an arrow showing the latest new construction. So you can see the difference in scale of the new construction. Those pictures are also intended to represent just how close that structure is to our cottages. So the other thing is that because the request that's before the commission is of a site plan, it's very, very difficult for any of us to understand what, in fact, is intended to be built. So will there be fenestration looking out on our association, or just the opposite? Will we be looking into a really inhospitable blank hard wall? What is the commission's intent for the space, or the owner's intent for the space in between the sidewall and the property boundary? Would there be a requirement for this property to then put a fence on that boundary? Would there be a requirement for there to no longer be, say, a site patio or some sort of outdoor entertainment space in that setback? These are all things that have provisions in the zoning regulations for other sorts of new construction. But again, this R2 zone and these associations are a little bit unusual. So they don't necessarily come under that jurisdiction. But it would seem that if this cottage is approved, and if it's approved at this massing, at this height, then the abutting neighbors who are so very close would like to see some sort of mitigation, fencing, some understanding of what this cottage looks like. But without that, we would actually prefer that it not go up, that it not be built. So even though it is very, very close to the property line currently, and even though that is a non-conforming site, it is something that we have all lived with. The current owners, myself included, bought our cottages knowing that that cottage was there. We didn't buy our cottages, nor have we invested in them and invested in our summers there, thinking that a Malibu mansion would rise next to us. And I apologize. I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I'm just saying it because it's the easiest way to give people who have never been to Landfare Cove or to Sunrise Cove Association an opportunity to understand our scale and what it means for us. And then the last thing that I'll add is one of the reasons that there are still 15 of the original scale cottages remaining in Sunrise Cove. So that means that others have come before you, and I will admit I have never come before you before. But there's a reason for that. And the reason is that up until March 31st of this year, 30 days has to take 31st of this year, in 2021, Landfare Cove Association did not own the land. We leased the land. Notices for abutters would have gone to the property owner, not to us. We often didn't know when Sunrise Cove was doing something. That's not very neighborly as Sunrise Cove, but legally they were completely compliant. So we didn't have those notices, but we have now purchased the land. You can imagine the purchase of this 7+ acre piece of land by 84 families is a gigantic investment because we love Brantford and we love the Brantford shore and we love Landfare Cove and Sunrise Cove. So now what we're saying is we would like a thoughtfulness, we would like to ask your consideration to no longer build these very tall structures so close to our sweet seasonal cottages. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Other members of the public wish to comment?
Good evening. I'll be short and sweet. My name is Tracy Kelly. I'm the current Vice President of the Landfare Cove Association, soon to be President as of October 1st. So for the record, I just want to state that there's a few of us that are here tonight in support of Trina Lerner's comments. And again, I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that most of us at Landfare share the same sentiments as our owners that live along that property line that will be affected by this new structure if it's built as is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other members of the public wish to comment? Hearing none, Mr. Preddy, do you have some comments? Would you like to respond to the public comments?
Sure. Where to start? So, as far as the space between the cottages, the cottage at, I believe it's 51 on the Landfare side, is only 2.5 feet, I think, off the property line. There's not really nothing we can do about that. However, we are moving it, and in the existing cottages that we're replacing is about the same distance on our side of the property line. So we are making that 5 feet into 13 feet almost. A fence could be put on the property line, I guess. It's going to be, if we put it right on the property line, it's going to be very close to their house. I don't see that as ideal either. The intention was that the space that the property, the building is moving away from would be lawn, so that space in the setback area would be lawn. As far as the crowding, we are trying to again move it away, move it in between the two houses that are in the front, sort of trying to split the difference so they aren't quite so crowded with each other. But as the lady said, you guys have approved a number of these already. I'm not sure, as long as we're meeting all the requirements, I'm not sure how you couldn't approve this now. You know what I mean? The stages kind of have this been set, and I appreciate the concerns. If I lived next door, I'd probably voice the same concerns, but to my knowledge, there aren't any view easements or anything like that. So I don't, again, as long as we're doing everything that we're supposed to within the regulations, again, we could offer to put the fence up. I'd have to speak to the owner about that, or the association president about that, I guess. But, you know, or some sort of planting or something on that property line. But unfortunately, he's not here tonight, so I can't say for sure. But
would you be averse to continuing this so you could have that discussion with them and the neighbors?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
And he should be, you know.
Have any architectural plans been done yet?
Marcy had a question whether you have any architectural plans or elevations.
We do, actually.
Okay. Well, and you can show us, but if we continue this, then you could show them and then talk about possible fencing or plantings or something.
This is the elevations of the structure again, because of the limitations. The building's only 20 feet wide, so if you've been in building business or real estate at all, you know it's not a very wide house. Those are the elevations again. So there's just on the street side, there's just a 4x4 entry platform, and then on the water side is steps down to the lawn. There isn't on the side that the Landfare's Cove side, there isn't any doors or anything on that side. Or the other long side. And then there are floor plans. But can make them available at Town Hall if somebody, between now and the next meeting, if the neighbors want to come view them, then
Yeah, at this point, since you brought it to the attention of the commission, you'd have to submit them into the application file, so,
that's fine.
yeah, you can bring
I
them.
could leave you these if you want, or bring you new ones tomorrow.
Sure, yeah. Actually, could be best if possible.
Which?
I'd take these.
Okay.
Yeah, let's,
Fine.
tomorrow's fine, actually, but, yeah. Somebody wants to look at them, they'd be here also.
Yeah.
So if you leave them up, people can look at them.
Can I make a comment? So when you said that you could have more square footage on the second floor, I was immediately concerned that you were going horizontally to the property line and that there might be an air rights question, which doesn't appear to be the case, that you're coming forward towards the water with that overhang. So
Yeah,
to
2
me,
feet.
that's sympathetic to the concern of the neighbor. And then the roof line with the gabled ends, although it's high and the overall structure's high, it is varied and it, so I'm glad, I guess the question to me and to the architect and to the neighbors would be, with that pitch of roof, do you go with a steeper pitch roof for architectural interest, or do you use a flatter roof to limit the height of the structure? And obviously I would defer to Joe Chadwick on his sensibilities as an architect, but those are just my immediate observations as it relates to the site plan.
And I'm not the architect, but I believe that the pitch was chosen so that there's some usable space at that level. Again, there's very little above 7 feet. It's not real space, but it is usable, right?
Is it all, commission okay with continuing this to allow the applicant to maybe meet with the neighbors and to Landfare's Cove folks, and we can continue this to the next meeting? And just so you're aware, this is a special exception for grading. That's why we're here.
Right.
The things you're talking about aren't necessarily relating to grading. So I'm just, we're sensitive to that. We're sensitive to neighbors getting along and so forth. And there are questions about the nonconformities and so forth, but just, you should be aware of that in your discussions. So if that's okay, then we, questions.
Jim, I just like a clarification on who owns the property. Is this an association property, or are these lots privately owned, or?
I'm actually.
The lady said something about it was leased, now they own.
Oh, that's the Landfare's Cove side.
Huh?
That was the Landfare's Cove side.
Landfare's Cove.
Yeah, this is Sunrise Cove.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, so this is not. So these lots are privately owned. The lot, are they?
It's all one property.
Cove is now privately owned.
Landfare's Cove is, right.
Sunrise Cove is as one parcel.
Right. It's one parcel.
Sunrise Cove we're talking about.
correct.
They're owned as a condominium style type of thing,
Yes.
right? So.
I believe that's the case, yes.
So shouldn't these laws be in the bylaws of the association?
They are. They have their own set of rules for what's allowed to be built there.
Right, so is a three-story building allowed?
Yes. In fact, there's an approval letter that I forwarded to Evan from the association approving this structure from their board.
So do disputes, for lack of a better word, between the Landfare's Cove Association and the Sunrise Cove Association relative to the specifics of their, building, is that a legal issue that's outside of our involvement, Mr. Attorney?
But I'll give you my quick reaction. Obviously, what we're enforcing are zoning regulations. Our zoning regulations have a 35-foot height. They're under that. So that's we don't enforce private, association rules and so forth. Right. The legal question that sort of interested me about this is that the nonconformity in the R2 zone, you can have one house per lot, or and they have 35. And so is this by enlarging the footprint of one of the dwellings that isn't allowed? Are you expanding a nonconforming use? That's the legal question in my mind. Even though it conforms with coverage and setback and everything else.
Okay, versus intensification, for example.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
could easily be considered that.
Right, because you're not adding, you're not increasing, it's the same number before, but it's a little bit bigger, so that would be the issue. Even though it does not, you're reducing a nonconformity, you're actually bringing it into the setback, but that was sort of the issue that floated through my head. In any event, so that's for you. We understand that you're here for a grading application. That's for them. So hopefully you guys can talk. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue this matter to our September 16th meeting. Hopefully you have an opportunity to speak about some of the issues here. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave you this one. I'll get another set if you want.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if we could. People might be interested in looking at them right now since they're here, I would imagine. We could put them somewhere. I don't want to derail the meeting.
Put them outside. Maybe you have a number of people that we have other matters to continue in our agenda, so perhaps you can go outside with them. And so that completes our scheduled public hearings for this evening. So now we'll. Why don't we take up the items that I think we can do, which are, I believe, item number, what was it, 3, the special exception for the accessory apartment. That was 11 Circle Drive. Jasmine Vargas, and the applicant was Leopold Otero. This was a special exception. Accessory apartment, they appeared to conform with the regulations, and Evan, in your staff report, I think you recommended condition, the typical finding and condition in connection with accessory apartments is my understanding.
Correct. I can repeat it again. Prior to the issuance of a zoning permit or the zoning authorization for the issuance of a building permit, the following shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement officer, the owner of the accessory apartment property, or the owner of the accessory apartment property must file a deed restriction on the land records requiring that unit, if rented, be rented at or below prices that would qualify the apartment as affordable housing as defined by CGS Section 830G. The deed restriction is to be reviewed by town council or follow his approval format with evidence that the recording of executive deed is the deed restriction version approved by the town council or that follows his approved format.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments? If not, someone want to make a motion to approve the application with the conditions as just read by Evan. And who's voting? Are we at the 5 regulars?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion made by Marcy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
So that's approved.
Did you catch that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, and I think the next one that we had was the after the fact special exception for grading. This was the item number 4, 8 High Plains Road. And again, they appeared to have been unaware of the wetlands, which kind of triggered this, I guess, and have complied and heard no public comment in opposition. So, Evan, do you want to review your recommendation for that?
Yes, staff recommended 2 conditions. Prior to the issuance of a zoning permit or the authorization for the issuance of a building permit, all conditions of the approval granted by the Inland Wetlands Commission on August 16th, 2021 shall be met. And number 2, an as-built survey shall be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Department showing the limits of vegetation, locations of any significant trees, revised grading, installation of planting, and the location of a split rail fence.
So does someone want to make a motion to approve the application of those 2 conditions?
So moved.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Marcy. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
So that application's approved. There you go. Okay, so that brings us then to our minutes. And we have 2 sets of minutes that I think we can review. The first was our minutes for the July 1st meeting that were, I believe, mailed out in our package. And I don't know if you've had a chance to review, and if you have, someone will make an appropriate motion for the July 1st minutes.
Move to approve.
Joe Chadwick makes a motion to approve the minutes for the July 1st meeting. Is there a second? Second by John. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the July 1st meetings minutes are approved. Then we have the July 28th minutes, and those, I believe, were emailed to us by Michelle. Those are shorter. I think it's a one-pager. Yeah, a one-pager.
It's about as short as the meeting was.
Right.
I don't think I was there.
Marcy was not there, but I think Eric, so you can still vote if you want, but believe it or not, you can vote for approved minutes even if you're not there.
Oh, my name's not on the attendance.
It's, yeah, you're absent, but,
Okay, good.
right. Well, does someone want to make a motion to, I mean, you can, if you don't, do you want to vote or not?
I don't need to vote.
Okay. We'll get, who was here? Fred, were you here? Okay. Fred, you can vote on this. Okay, someone make a motion to approve the July 28th minutes, the special meeting of July 28th. Fred makes a motion to approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
July 28th minutes are approved. Correspondence, Harry, what do you got?
We have several items. Starting out with a response from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection regarding mean high water question regarding the Buckley Road development that was withdrawn. So that was included in the Commission's packet. We have 3 different referrals for zoning regulation changes. One is from the town of North Brantford, and they are proposing text amendments to create a specific tree removal business use. So there are standards for that, of what it could consist of, and a definition, and it identifies specific zones where it will be allowed and will not be allowed. So if anybody's interested in that, I can send you a copy of it, but I believe the public hearing will be on the 16th, same night as our meeting. Then we have a text amendment, zoning regulation text amendment from East Haven. I could not find an agenda online, so I don't know when this is being considered. They are proposing that lot line revisions require zoning approval prior to being allowed to be filed on the land records. Frankly, I'm not sure about that regulation, but it's not our time, so I don't need to worry about it. We also have proposed amendment to the Pine Orchard zoning regulations to work through some definitions with respect to precluding some features between, I believe it's the front edge of buildings fronting Long Island Sound and the water itself. So it would restrict structures, fencing, landscaping features, hedges, plants to no greater than 3 feet in height. Would exempt deciduous trees with a caliber of greater than 4 inches and a canopy of, I guess, 16, I think it's square feet. So it defines all those terms. We've also got several pieces of communication regarding cell towers, and I'll just tell you what, generally they are. It's swapping equipment out at the smokestack at Brantford Landing, the old MIF building. Also swapping equipment out at the cell tower just to the north of the Subaru dealership on North Main Street. Same thing down at Pine Orchard Road. That's sort of the one across on the north side of the tracks. If you've been to that new bike path through Tabor property, you can see it from where you're at the pond. It's just north on that. There's also going to be equipment swap at the cell tower on the north side of Route 1 across from Five Guys on West Main Street, 850. And a similar proposal for a cell tower to the north of, there's a little road off West Main Street called Beaver Road, which is between Firestone and Eli's. So the cell tower down there. So very busy in the cell tower front, and that's all correspondence we have.
Thank you, Harry. Nothing under old business, and we have 2 items under new business, I believe. First was the 11-lot re-subdivision for 175 Cherry Hill Road, and schedule a public hearing in the future for that?
Yeah, we still have the standing motion to allow us to do it in conjunction with you.
To do a what? I'm sorry.
Set the public hearing date. So you recall during COVID, we basically you guys deferred to staff to do that. And we'll look at it, I would imagine probably either the first meeting in October or the second meeting in October would be when we'll set that up. Have been in touch with the applicant's engineer by email a little bit, but I won't get into any of the issues we talked about yet. Number 2 has already been set because it's a application in conjunction with the application we already have on before us, basically, which is for that car wash across from the fire station.
Okay.
So that's already set for the 16th. And then we did not get this on the agenda, and I'll just let you know that it's in here because it'll be automatically accepted for the record tonight, which is an application for a Phase 3 at Summit Place. That's the incentive housing zone development and that sort of commercial cul-de-sac, which is now becoming a residential cul-de-sac, across from McDonald's on West Main Street. And the corner there is the Liberty Mutual Bank, and I think there's a little office building, and then there's a self-storage building on the right as you go in. Do you remember there? No, they're proposing to repurpose and build another Phase 3 of this. I think it's about 40 units where the Brantford Hall School was in the parking lot on that left side as you're going in. So it's sort of complete the whole thing. And that's it for new business.
Okay, thank you, Harry. So we'll schedule that for a public hearing when it's ready, I guess, right?
Yep.
That brings us into other business. Item number 1 of other business, proposed zoning text amendment regarding solar energy regulations. Just bring us up to speed on that.
Sure. I very recently, this afternoon, discovered that when I was submitting this thing, either I did it or someone else in the office, it was a double-sided copy. So the one you got in your packet, you were missing a couple pages. So I've got the whole version here. I'll just pass it out. I got it too, right? Come on. So you may recall at some point last spring, we talked about doing something along these lines. I believe the commission's approved in the past a ground-mounted small-scale solar installation as an accessory use to a residential dwelling. But this would formally and specifically allow these uses as accessories to existing residential development. That's great. It was difficult for me to take time to do this, given staff changes and all the things were going on last spring. So I had a little bit extra time in our contract with our consulting planners, John Guskowski and Mike D'Amato of Tyche Planning. So I asked them to put together a draft regulation, and I've gone through it, but I think it probably needs a little bit of tweaking up, just in terms of some of the technicalities, like where would the definitions go? Well, they're going to go in section 2.2. Things like that, some of the wording. I wanted to get in front of you to get an idea of, to give you an idea of what is being proposed at this point by staff and get some initial feedback. It's essentially what would happen if you're in agreement is this would be a regulation amendment proposed by the commission itself. So we would advertise this out, whatever version of this you'd like to go forward, or if you don't want to go forward at all, then we won't. But this is sort of where we thought would be a good place to start. So in here, there's some specific definitions starting on, looks like the 3rd page. You can see there's a fixed rack definition, fixed tracker, ground-mounted solar array, small scale, a large scale, as well as a definition for roof-mounted solar array. So looking at what is proposed here is for roof-mounted solar arrays, this would make that a permitted accessory use for all zones, including commercial zones. So on any roof that's in a structure that's been approved, an approved principal accessory structure, you're going to have a roof-mounted solar array subject to these limitations.
How does this compare to, you know, a structure that's after the height limit? This doesn't count? Or does that 2 foot allowed, for example, for the roof mounted have to be below the 35 feet?
Right now, it'd have to be below 35 feet. Whether we want to add in some kind of exemption for that, something maybe we want to discuss too. I mean, right now, there is exemption for certain features on top of the 35 feet.
Well, there's a lot of pressure near the water in buildings to get up to the 35 feet because of the flood elevations.
Yep.
So I don't, you know, this further.
Yeah, I mean, it's something really just for the commission to decide whether you want to do that. I mean, I can sort of try to get more information from maybe other communities that have put together some kind of regulation and see which way they've gone and why, or how often a solar installation actually goes to the ridge line of the roof, and, you know, a little bit above it.
I would be most curious along shoreline areas, how that's handled.
Yeah.
Over tonight.
Always, you know, and there is a provision down here. We've got some comments, this has been routed around in the office a little bit. I just go to the bottom of this, just sort of working off of that. There is a provision down here for ground-mounted solar array about the array should be positioned and operated so as to minimize the potential for off-site glare. You know, that's a little bit in the eye of the beholder, but they have them, I think, now where they can adjust for seasonal changes in the sun angle. There's all kinds of, you know, it's quite sophisticated technically, depending on what you want to buy and install. It's my understanding.
That's the floor panels, the ones from the
This is on
ground up.
ground mounted, yeah, which you can change the angle of. I mean, you're on the roof, I think you're kind of stuck with what you got. Maybe there's provisions I'm not aware of. Anything that can sort of adjust, like a louver, a roof-mounted installation. I don't know. Maybe they have them.
Probably follow the sun. It probably follows the sun to get the most.
Yeah. I mean, I think this also could be an issue on a roof-mounted array, you know, depending on the angle of the roof. And, you know, so it could be a seasonal thing where all of a sudden, you know, a certain time of the year, you get a certain angle and you get a reflection into somebody's window. Is it? I don't know.
The ground units, do they get up to close to 25 feet? Sounds very tall to me.
You know, that I don't know of, so I'll...
10 feet at best.
Yeah, we've got a 15-foot accessory structure height limit, and above that, you need a special exception. So I don't know why the 25 feet, frankly, so I did not put this together.
Sounds
so
a bit much.
Yeah. So I'll find out if there's some
We're talking about
reason for
building
that.
at 15 feet. Don't you think that?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah.
Max?
You know, there may be a very good reason, but let me
Well, I think this
do some
might,
more digging.
you know, work with the technology that's available to maximize the solar, but I'm trying to look at this and compare it to, you know, a small zone and somebody wanting to put a ground mounted and, you know, how that affects coverage and heights and neighbor impact for glare or what have you in some of our less conforming zones that are pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean, we've been having battles for generator installation, you know, because people have been putting those in all over town with all the storms and everything in some of the smaller lots. I mean...
What's because they're not fitting in the setback or just neighbor?
One of them I can't really understand the rationale, but that's all right. But we've had issues, and that's just, you know, a ground-mounted thing, so something 25 feet tall. They put some of these generators up above the flood limit, try to get them, you know.
They're noisy.
They're noisy when you test them, yeah, absolutely.
However you want to say it.
So let me explore that 25 feet height. I mean, one thing I wanted to go about asking you a question about is the large-scale ground-mounted solar arrays. So these are proposed to be between 50 and 75% of the footprint of a principal structure. Another option would be to allow them to be proposed as a principal use of a lot. So this would basically allow as a principal use, a solar array farm. So I think everybody's probably seen these things driving through the countryside. We've got one down at the Tabor property now. And is this something you want to do? So this is in the draft. My first question would be, do you want to allow it now? And if you do, where do you want to allow it?
Well, my concern is for, say you've got a property that's, in a half-acre zone and they happen to have a second lot next to them.
Right.
That could fit, maybe not the scale of Tabor, but something, again, I mean, that, how much do we want these, or how many instances could these be spotting up for people,
Yep. Well, I mean, right now, for that kind of residential thing, assuming it's a small array,
For me, the large ground mounted strikes me as more of a commercial
yeah.
use,
Yeah,
either
exactly.
to, power a commercial business or provide a business of creating power to,
Yep.
to sell power, as opposed to, a residential use where they might want to be sustainable by living off the grid, not be tied to.
Or reduce the electric bill or, et cetera. Sure. Yeah.
It doesn't say what zone it's talking about, the other ones.
No, that's to be determined. So that hasn't been, so those are one of my, I have several questions about this for the commission, but I think that's one of the biggest is, do you want to deal with these now, and where would you want to have them if you do want to deal with them?
There's a differentiation between an array being on the ground as opposed to a flat roof commercial building. For example, like Zane's has an array on the roof, but not on the ground. So will these regs say something? The reason why I asked that question is probably not totally pertinent to what we're talking about, but having been in the roofing business for 40 years, I just wonder, all these panels that they're stacking with the wind, we were worried about getting 70, 80 mile an hour winds. I could just see these things flying off the roofs like a deck of cards.
Well, I have not talked to Tony Sinicola about building code requirements for these kinds of installations, but I know the array that went in at Tabor Farm, they had to look at wind load and how there might be a lift created by the wind and the shape of the whole structure and all those, how that would all play out, and how to ballast it down. And there were actually, discussions when they were proposing it for the backside of the landfill is how to actually anchor the thing, because you got a cap right under the soil. There's not much soil there. There's an impervious cap for the landfill to cover it, so that you don't have water going through
You
it.
balance it on the ground and on the roof. If you
Right.
get a factory and they decide to put an array of solar panels up there, you're anchored to the steel decking, it's somewhere along the line it's going to create its own problem.
Yep.
Well, and the thing with the ground panels is, a lot of times you're trying to get the light as soon as you, above the treetop level, you start looking at ground surfaces, now you have to consider what other trees are in the area, what's hitting it, and so forth. And, just look at the IG2. I mean, I tend to think of those large ground systems as more commercially appropriate, for lack of a better way. And if I look at the IG2 zone where we've reduced the square footage of coverage, it doesn't seem to me like there's a lot of room left after you try to fit in the parking that these buildings need, which isn't enough, and now you're trying to accommodate an array. It's going to get proposed in a parking lot, which is going to further pull back the, so it just seems like it, I mean, obviously it's a case-by-case basis, but.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen innovative ones where they actually put them behind the parking lot, so
Oh, yeah,
right,
which that I think is a great idea.
Yeah. I don't frankly technically know enough to really answer a lot of the questions. So, I mean, I will go back to some of the folks who I have a little more information and talk to the building official. And I mean, just as a sort of generality, I mean, do you think it makes sense to look at providing for the large scale arrays sort of in commercial industrial zones, whatever, now? We want to wait? Do you want to just chisel in allowing it to be put on existing commercial buildings, small scale, existing residential buildings, small scale, so it's clearly allowed as an accessory use? I mean,
I'm concerned about small scale on small properties in residential areas.
Yeah.
That I don't think.
For ground mounted or roof mounted? For
Ground or roof?
Yeah.
In small,
Okay.
in retail areas, that somebody might have an extra lot, 2 or 3 lots, and they
Yeah.
only have one house, and then in a neighborhood, all of a sudden you see a little solar farm there. I'm not sure that's going to be very nice to have in a residential area.
Yeah, I'm not too keen.
I think you would have to have almost a zero value or zero utility for the ground surface in order to put a solar array on it to cover it, because you can't play ball on a solar array. You can't walk your dog on a solar array. But, to elevate them over a parking structure, to make a parking structure underneath, that makes a certain amount of sense. If you have a perimeter condition, a setback condition, or a steep slope condition that you can't use for anything else, that may be a very optimal place to put a solar array. But I think there's a certain situationality that needs to be, just for practical purposes, that needs to be taken into account, because when you start writing something like this from scratch with the theory of, we're going to put solar panels everywhere, you kind of realize that they don't always need to go everywhere. Tops of commercial buildings, perfect. Tops of roofs of houses, that's just fine. Once they start occupying ground space, they get to be kind of
An eyesore.
an attractive nuisance too, because if there's something falling from the sky, it's going to find those solar panels, whether it's kids playing ball two or 3 blocks down, or a seagull deciding that that's an attractive place to try to break open shellfish. So that's a little more it needs some evolution room, and things like that cross the building code jurisdiction. There was a note up here about fire venting. You're putting the solar panels on one side of the roof. You can vent the roof from the other, practically speaking. Given a perimeter area around the roof, there will be a module to the solar panels, and if the criteria is access to the roof for maintenance or some consideration for gravity load and wind uplift load, those are all building code conditions.
Great.
So we should not be sliding into that too deep.
Territory, okay.
I guess I would be okay with a principal use for ground mounted in industrial zones. By special permit.
So I'm going to have to go that route, and I'm more concerned about residential.
Yep.
In ground units in residential areas where in small areas.
Yeah.
Well, there was one done, I want to say it was for one of the Coulters, and I think it came before the commission for, I think it was oversized accessory structure. I think that's what it came in through.
What zone was it in?
I don't remember. It might have been like the R3, I want to say. I can go try and dig that up. I just haven't been able to, time-wise, but let me look at that. Based on what you're saying, I think if you allowed it at all, ground-mounted residential, it would be really limited and probably a special exception process.
Well, I would think it would have to be in the residential zones that have large space.
Right. There may be reasons why someone has a house and it's quite a bit shaded by trees or something, and then they want an option of putting it.
Well, or they buy a property that's wooded, and then they want to do solar on the ground, and now you're taking down 30-inch diameter trees.
There's
now you've got a conflict of the two regulations.
Right. Exactly.
Does the coverage of the solar array count toward coverage of the land? Like, if the coverage is 20% and you're at 16 or 18, then you put a solar array there. Does that count for coverage? It should. It'd be, in my opinion, I'm saying. It's no different if you built a garage or, you're covering land that can't be used anymore. Kind of what Joe was saying.
Yeah. Well, you look at it as the water's going to go off the array, and it's going to run underneath the next array, wherever it's going to go.
Which is
and that land under that dirt underneath the array, it's going to be able to infiltrate into the ground. unlike a building structure, a parking area, or a walkway or whatever. So there is that to think about. I mean, that whatever that amount of ability to get that water, you know, it either goes over the ground or goes into the ground. And depending on characteristics of the soil, if it's lawn or whatever what it is, a certain amount's going to go in versus over.
That's if coverage is dependent on permeability. But how about coverage as a function of massing? You know, say you do a portico, you know, how do you consider that? Does that become like massing like a garage coverage, even though it might be pervious underneath the array? You know, so you do gravel parking
Yeah, that's a good
underneath,
question.
and, you know.
Yeah, that's a thing too, and they're also changing the technology of these panels consistently and fairly quickly. You know, my understanding is they're working on squares this big that produce as much solar as a panel.
Wow.
You know, I'm looking into solar now for my building on Main Street, and I'm just kind of looking around and see what my options are. Their panels are very thin. They're flat screened now. They're not thick off the roof line. I don't think it's going to create much more height.
Aren't there roof, they're talking about actual roof tiles that can be photovoltaic?
Yeah, they have
It's
those also.
Shingles.
Tesla shingles, yeah, all right.
Yeah, and another company also makes them a little bit cheaper than Tesla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you
But that's the
jump
thing,
into
that, you know, mass production,
computer
price drop, I don't know.
the new one or the laptop.
Me neither. I'm sorry.
It's like, the question is like, where do you jump into the
Yeah,
technology? When the computer's still a huge mainframe taking up a huge room, or when you get to the laptop, like, you know, where are we in that growth of solar?
Right. I mean, my tendency would be to something a little more cut back to allow them to happen, for someone to put something on their existing dwelling or their existing business, at least on the roof. And the ground mounted, I don't know, it sounds like the consensus I'm hearing is probably no, unless it's very limited, the height's lowered to whatever the minimum amount that's going to make it workable. And a lot of other factors are considered. It's a special exception. That's sort of my hearing.
Also with the ground mounted, maintenance of the ground underneath it. I just got back today from stepdaughter's houses in Wisconsin, driving back and forth between, you know, Madison and way the heck out in the farms. There are many ground mounted solar arrays out in rural areas of Wisconsin, and I talked to a few people, and they have problems with invasive species collecting underneath the solar panels because they're just difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
So you either end up with an excessive amount of Roundup or a big job to...
Well, those are the big facilities, right? You're talking about the large-scale solar farms almost kind of thing,
It's
right?
not a whole solar farm. These are just like, you know, things farmers set up in a corner to, you know, get a light strip.
For residential ground mounted, are there any that you're aware of?
Well, just this one that came before us as, I think, oversized accessory structure because of the height.
I think for me as a general rule of thumb, based on what we were just talking about, if we make the regulations a little bit more restrictive, anticipating the growth of the technology becoming smaller, you know, that might be a way to hedge time a little bit, you know, where we're not going to be out of date before we get this adopted.
Yeah. All right. Let me go take it back to the workshop and get some more information and bring it back to you at a future meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And now we're on to cannabis.
All right.
Can we take a break?
If you want. We'll take a 5-minute break.
I feel like cannabis will take a while.
Okay, I think we're back. So, guys, we'll come back to session and we will discuss the proposed cannabis zoning regulation amendment. Harry, what'd you come up with during our break?
Okay. Did a little investigation and I attended a webinar about the recent state law change and learned a little bit more. One of the things I learned, I know in our discussion back before the break, I assumed that we were just talking about license types at the state level that would be permitted at the local level, and there was going to be a limit on those to one every 25,000 population. So we would potentially qualify for two as a town. That is only true for some of the license types. So I'm just going to read out the names of these things. There are producers, dispensary facilities, cultivators, micro-cultivators, retailers, hybrid retailers, food and beverage manufacturers, product manufacturers, product packagers, delivery service transporters. So I think we were talking about basically the retail for our recreational use license. That is limited 1 per 25. The other one's limited as a micro cultivator, which allows whoever's running the facility to grow a certain amount and sell a certain amount as a combined operation. And then the other category we were talking about was, what about the existing dispensaries? We have one. Someone can apply to convert that to a hybrid retailer, as it's called. So there's, and just to go back over this a little bit, all these license types would be subject to a lottery. Somebody who wants to open or get one would have to apply through a lottery system at the state level. I believe they get sort of a preliminary approval, they go in the lottery, and if they get picked, they get a full approval. If somebody's operating an existing dispensary, they can convert to a hybrid retailer and go around the lottery system, but they need to submit a pretty substantial application fee, or whatever they call it. It's $1 million. If they partner up with a social equity partner, it's called, and those folks are defined by the state. I don't know if that's even done yet. Then the fee is $500,000, but still pretty substantial. So I have not talked to our local dispensary yet. I do have a call in from them. I haven't gotten back to them. But my sort of understanding of where the commission seemed to be was you wanted to allow it as a retail level, and it seemed to me made sense to probably throw in the micro cultivator, since that would be limited by population also, and then provide for the existing dispensary to convert over if they wanted to do that. So I sort of picked these types, and I pulled out the hybrid retailer, the micro cultivator, and the regular retailer. And
May I ask a clarification?
Sure.
On the micro cultivator,
Yep.
does the business entity license require that the function of selling and micro cultivation occur on the same premises? In other words, if I have the license to be a micro cultivator,
Yep.
can I sell here and grow over here?
I think it has to be in the same premises, but I'm not 100% sure of that, so I'll have to double check that.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a second source to sell, because you're also going to have an independent retail, you said.
So I don't think you'll be able to sell as a micro cultivator.
No, he said that you could.
I believe you can.
But he's
Yeah.
asking if you sell within where you might
It have to be the same property. I think it does have to be the same property.
Farm market.
Yeah, farm market, it's the same thing, just it's a different product, but it's the same basic.
I believe that the law is that you could grow 6 plants per adult
At your own house?
At your own house, which means
yeah, that's
if you have, if you're married and have 2 children, you could grow 24 plants.
Wow. 2 children over the age of 18
or
are
over
still
18,
at home.
and you're still at home. That's a lot of plants.
Right, but that's, basic recreation stuff. But for the sake of business, though, I was asking because I had done botanical labs, and when you're trying to grow something with for a specific scientific purpose, you need a fairly confined and contained area so that you don't have stray insects, stray pollinators, and there's a fairly serious investment in making the environment to grow something. And I would imagine this has about the same level as a sort of scientific botanical
My understanding is none of this is growing outside. I believe it's all within a building, controlled and contained, is my understanding. So I think that follows that. How hyper they keep the isolation, maybe that's left up to the business and the grower. There must be, if you're doing this stuff, I guess you know what you need to do or not do, hopefully.
I guess my concern is when you first started, you were talking about, all the product package or all the different facets of the supply chain and all having separate licenses. And to me, it was unclear whether that's a potential for, one grower to have 6 subsequent supply chain related things that now have to be zoned for related to this one product.
Well, that could happen out of town, basically. I mean, the one thing I think you're not allowed to prohibit is distribution. So I think if, for example, in another community, there is a delivery service, I don't think you can stop that person from delivering from a municipality outside of yours into residences or wherever in that, our town, for example.
I was just trying to get a sense of the total types of licenses and what that means for potential applications resulting from those licenses.
I didn't really,
and
frankly.
if you're only allowed 2, some of them seem to have population limits, but is it 2 for each type that's related, because it has a different name? Does that then free up another license?
It's only for, my understanding is for microcultivator, retailer. Those are the only 2 that are limited by population. The others, for some reason, have no limits. I don't know why. I don't know whether there's going to be limits at the state level. I didn't get into it that far because what I tried to, this is just my thinking, was that, all right, the ones that are limited, we talked about, Commission talked about, I think, in your discussion before, well, let's just start out a little bit smaller. Let's allow that to happen. And then we learn more as, other towns, for example, maybe went through this. Well, this is just going to evolve, absolutely.
So there's 4 licenses that could come into Brantford, and what's to control? 3. I guess I'm thinking monopoly or something, but what's to control if you have to pay that much does it become a microcultivator? You have to pay the $500,000?
I don't know what the fee is for that. No.
The fees were assigned to.
That's a lottery system. So there's an application fee, and then you go into.
For cultivating or retail? For
microcultivating and retailing. The only thing that I think is not in the lottery system is the hybrid retailer, which allows a dispensary that currently exists to convert to also sell marijuana recreationally.
So to me, it's, you have to have a lot of money to enter into the industry, which makes me think that it's only, and then you mentioned the whole social, I don't know what you meant by the social.
Well, that's all defined. This thing is like a 300-page bill. There's a lot of stuff in here. I mean, a lot of it's intended to address inequities that resulted as part of the war on drugs, which communities were impacted by, enforcing drug laws and people incarcerated. There's all kinds of issues that are trying to be addressed in this legislation. So I think that's where the social equity partners and things come into play.
So the people that have the money that can invest to make more money have to give back to
I think there's a certain reserve also for people from a community that's been impacted. They get a certain, I think special consideration in the lottery process. I mean, there's a whole, it's really very complicated.
But from the land use perspective, right, is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, exactly.
It's basically people that grow it and people that sell it. Is that those are the 2 main distinctions of the uses? Is that what we're talking about? I know you made like 5 categories.
Yeah, I mean,
those are the 2 that stick out to me, right?
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, do you think that's a reasonable approach? Just limit what we're maybe allowing now to those categories that would be limited by population caps. And that's only for a couple of years, but that will change. But
I'm not understanding what else the licensing are for. I mean, there's a growing license, there's a retail license, and what are the other licenses?
They're defined in the statute.
Why do we care what state licenses they get?
We don't care. I mean, I'm just saying, as a land use perspective, if you allow a cannabis establishment under that license type, there could be more than 2 per town.
Okay.
We could have, because there's no population cap on that kind of license.
Why are we regulating by license type, or do we?
for that very reason, because, I mean, you don't have to. If you want more of them, we can provide for cannabis establishments beyond the micro-cultivator and the retailer and the hybrid retailer.
I'm just trying to
You tell me
understand
what you
the
want.
potentiality
So this was
for
a-
expansion
okay, I
of
get
this.
sorry?
I'm just trying to understand the potentiality for expansion of this because of the multiple license types and the layers, whether it's the economic layers of the money that has to go into it and the social reforms coming out of it versus, we all come down to land use, but it's a business use. And so,
Absolutely,
is
absolutely.
it an industry business use or is it a retail,
Well, it's
shopping centers, business, retail?
I think all of
But
those.
I understand I was unclear before. By using the state definition, then we limit the number that we could do because they're limited.
Right. It's a
Okay,
handy
so I
way to
understand.
say, okay, we're going to allow it, but we're not going to.
Let it run rampant.
Because,
We'll let, rather than go into everything is allowed, we'll just do a little bit and we'll see how it goes. And then you could change the regulations later and allow more if you want to. Different types.
Okay, I'll go with that.
I think we should understand what the other licensing or.
All right, I can give you more information. I can go dig into that and
Yeah, only because.
give you little definitions of them because.
Is the hybrid retailer is the hybrid retailer in an IG2 a special exception because of our existing use?
That was my idea, to allow them in the IG2 is already there, and then allow that business if it wants to relocate to other spots along in the BLs.
So that's going to open up the whole idea of retail in an IG2 zone, which is now limited to what, 3,000 square feet?
Well, it's just a
Doesn't that set a
establishment. It's
precedent?
one single establishment. So you're talking about the only.
I'm not thinking cannabis here. I'm thinking the IGT zone and our current zone for only allowing up to 3,000 square feet for a retail, like the brewery, for example.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I have to look in the law to see if there's a size limit on a hybrid retailer. I mean, I think the dispensary right now has got some kind of limit on how big it can be, I believe. So I don't know how they would accommodate, when they're allowed to convert. What are the parameters of what they're allowed to convert to? How big can it be?
I think it would be worth also considering within the scope of this, the processing facility. At some point, this stuff comes from the farm and it needs to be broken down, separated, handled, cleaned. So there's some sort of processing involved, and there's probably even a further interest at some point in deriving cannabinoids for CBD products. So that could be a really good business for somebody and occupy a fairly substantial part of an industrial facility.
And there's, the food and beverage, production as well. So that's, I believe, a separate category. But let me get
There's a lot of things to consider. I know that growing marijuana, you have to be, if somebody's growing a hemp field, okay, which is very, very useful, and there is somebody growing that in, I think, North Brantford. They have a big field of hemp. If a marijuana plant is grown outdoors within, I think, a mile, it kind of ruins her crop. So,
the hemp crop.
Yeah, which is, I think we gotta, kind of be careful on where we put these. If there's any hemp crops, that's no marijuana. Yeah, it looks like marijuana leaves, but
it doesn't have the TH, whatever.
THC, and it's very beneficial for people and for those crops to continue growing properly. I think that's a concern we have. There's so many different concerns. I like to stay ahead of the curve with this personally, and not have it run rampant down the line, and having these stores pop up all over like liquor stores. I'd rather, again, stay ahead of the curve, get our income from the taxes that we can, and it's gonna happen. We might as well, I think, look into if we could do this and strategically place them places where it's not going to affect our children's minds or other crops like hemp crops that are, potentially can get damaged from this and not be splattered all over downtown Brantford. And just grab it all now, stay ahead. I would like to do it. And I think it's going to happen anyways. Well, we're not going to prevent this.
Well, if we do nothing, then you could go wherever any retail concern.
Right. So it just evolves into being allowed or not allowed based on what it would otherwise be. Just strip the marijuana component out of it. If it's a sale of marijuana, it's a retailer. If it's a retailer. Production, it's production. If it's whatever, it's,
So I think as a commission, we probably should have a little bit more control and say, okay, well, if we say yes to this, federally, they could over.
And that's your definition. That's the benefit of your definitions to address that. But it's just limited by population to 1 or 2 or whatever.
For the first couple of years, yeah.
So that you can't get, the proliferation of places selling little juvie balls of, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an unknown at this point. Who knows how many? I don't think there's going to be, my understanding is, any consideration at the state level in terms of spreading these things out geographically around the state. How many they're going to offer, I don't know that answer either. But
so I do want to spring up another concern with retailers of marijuana. So they get priced at a certain price point, which is always a little higher because you're now, you have to pay your overhead and so on and so forth. So the marijuana costs a little higher. Marijuana dealers that grow their marijuana or get it on the black market go to these parking lots and sell marijuana to the people going into the marijuana store for cheaper prices.
Oh, you mean like a black market undercutting?
Correct, and they do that in the parking lots.
Like scalping tickets.
Exactly, it's a great business model for these illegal independent dealers, and to me it creates problems. Okay, because now if you have this one underground guy going, another underground guy going, now they got a problem with each other. Now we're gonna have troubles in our streets of Brantford. It's just, I just think that we should all be aware of kind of what happens and what expands here, and does that black market end up going away?
Interesting.
I don't think so because, well, I don't know, do people sell their own wine? Is that a problem at package stores? And it's a little bit different than that right now.
Well, it's like anything else economically. Those who can afford the better product, better quality product with the assurances of the quality and the safety can afford it. And those that can't are going to be, risking having some, underground market material that might be a health issue because they can't, there's no controls behind it. But I'm actually thinking a little bit more economically about the whole processing side of it because, we've got IG2 land, and from a business development, economic development standpoint, it could be a great industry to bring to Brantford for our IG2 zone from, and maybe you don't focus on retailing it and you focus on, maybe not or indoor cultivation in the IG2 zone and processing, and focus less on the retail aspect of it in town where we're a little bit reluctant about the exposures.
That's a great solution for that area, and I love it to be contained out in those types of areas.
So would that mean like cannabis establishment other, would a processing come within other?
Right now, yeah. So I could slice out, if that's what the commission wants to do, look at the definition of a processing facility and slice that out and add that in as a special exception use in the IG2, for example, if you like.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable with cultivation and processing, than I do with the retail. Because
Well, let me take it back though. Do you want to allow the 1 or 2? Do you want cannabis establishment retailer as a special exception use in the BL zone, for example, and recognizing that you're only going to get 2 for the next 2 years?
Well, if we need to have it to control that.
I mean, I'm just asking, yeah.
Well, to me, I like the idea of stepping into it slow.
Yeah.
I think personally, I feel more comfortable stepping into it from a cultivation and processing aspect as a business than a resale aspect.
Well, I'm asking if you want to do both, because there was, my understanding consensus was the commission was kind of okay with that, was what I heard.
I
But
didn't
tell me if
realize
it's
all the
not.
other layers to this when we were
Yeah.
talking last. So now this is like,
No, I mean, I could pull out the definition of that, and I understand what you're saying, is that let's look at a way to allow a processing facility, at least in the industrial area.
right, where appropriate.
Right,
in the zone.
and do you still want to do 1 or 2 retailer-type facilities or micro-cultivators, for example, in the business zone along Route 1, out in the town center? But that's where I heard the commission was before.
Well,
We could change it.
Are those licenses forced upon us anyway?
No.
So if we do nothing with retail, are we
No, you can
opening the
define.
door to 20 of them?
No, what you can easily do is you're not, because the retailers are limited to 1 per every 25,000. So the most you're going to get are 2.
Of whether we zone for it or not?
No. If you zone for it, that's the limit. If you don't zone for it, you can zone it out, and then you don't get them. It's optional. So you can take the cannabis establishment retailer, you can cross that out. On the list of all the different types under cannabis establishment other, you can add retailer back in there, and all across the board it says N for no.
So as a
You can do that.
community, are we, do we think promoting retail of the product is better or promoting
I don't think you have to pick
both, or do we select?
It's A, B, or both, or neither.
Right.
It's up to you guys.
Yeah. To me, the options would be, yes, allow it as is, so we could allow it on Route 1 by special exception. That may be the way to go, and that was sort of where I was thinking. Or we just allow the existing guy to go retail if he wants and shut it out everywhere else.
Because we have somebody that does
Well, I mean,
medically with a license, but we have it going on already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he could do that or not do that, so that's up to the business owner's choice. I mean, he may kind of want to, spend $1 million for 2 years of, cornering the market. I mean, I don't know if it's going to make business sense for you.
Well, I'm okay with throwing it on BL as a special exception.
For the
That's
retailer?
What, the retail?
Okay.
I guess. I think I am. I don't know. I mean, we may have a public hearing and find out, we're promoting a gateway drug to our youth and shouldn't do it and let them drive elsewhere. And, there's good faith arguments to make either way. But I'm kind of okay with it because based on what we have
It
now.
would be all over the place. I mean, I think you're going to get a group of people that are.
Oh, of course you're going to get every, yeah.
It's
You get
just
comments from all over the place. It's really going to unfortunately end up, commission's call.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think at this point, I'm more comfortable with the cultivation and processing than I am of the retail.
So not allow it?
Minimize it, contain it to just the one hybrid that we have.
Okay.
Until we know what we're dealing with.
All right. Well, let
Its
me.
impact around schools and all that. I mean, I just feel like that's a little bit more cautious, but more economically viable for the town and not closing ourselves off to where society's going on the subject.
So we're only allowed to do 2 per number of people here.
2 retailers.
2 retailers. So
2 micro-cultivators. The producers could be, I mean, they're only going to be so many issued, and the market's only going to, handle so many. So you're not just like you're going to get 50,000 of them. It's just only going to be whatever you're going to get.
So the issue is 1 or 2. If we maybe 1 or up to 2.
Yeah, but the producers, you could potentially get more because there's no population limit on that, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, I think we're good with producing. I think everyone's fine with
All right, so
cultivating and no limit in processing. The growing and the processing, we're okay. Those are legit.
just designate a proper area for it, so it's just not everybody's growing because they have,
Right.
No. It's all
IG
inside. It's a
zone.
business use. It's, in the industrial zone is what I'm hearing.
Right.
So it's not somebody's,
And so the retail, the option is limited to the one that's there that may or may not decide to do it.
Yep.
Or get it to an option of up to 2.
Right.
And the other one would be, and it would be either in the spot that's there now or in the BL zone somewhere else if someone wanted.
Yep. And I don't know if you want to deal with the micro cultivator or not. That's sort of a,
I guess I'm
straddles
just
the line.
buying time by suggesting that we, regulate for the cultivating and the processing to attract businesses. And then once they're there, I mean, obviously once they're there, the retailers are going to want to, there's just the distance to, distribution or whatever, but I would think that retailers are going to want to follow anyway, but I just would rather
Well, you guys tell me. You guys tell me what
but
you want
that's
to
me.
do.
I mean, you
So,
guys, you
it's-
know, you need to step in.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm more open to free markets. And if it's legal and people want to do it and it's limited, then I'm okay with it. It's more, more analogous to liquor. No, it's more that. I understand the other argument. I think a good argument made that it's a gateway drug and we shouldn't be doing it at all. People can make that argument and whatever. And then you have your argument. They're going to get it somewhere, so let's get them.
Safely.
Let's get it to them safely and whatever. And I've kind of thought that's a decent argument. And if it's only 2, then I'm kind of okay with it. I mean, we have some experience with it. We've had this dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, are people showing up, in the parking lots of that place trying to say, hey, why are you going there? What else do you have? I don't know.
Well, I can tell you, we did move, and it came back to the commission, and we checked with the police department at that time. This was probably 3 years ago, and they were clean as a whistle and no problems whatsoever from a police standpoint with that dispensary.
I think we have much more problems at package stores. Police being called.
Right.
Than the dispensaries.
Yeah, and it's for kids, right? I assume, yeah.
What's the difference between the micro growing and the regular cultivating?
That I don't know the details. I'll have to get more. What I'm going to do is I'd like to look at all the license types and give you a little, paragraph, something on what they are, so everyone knows what it is and what I know what it is. And we can talk about the processing facility probably a little more intelligently. And it sounds like what I'm hearing is cultivating, processing, all that stuff that doesn't involve retail sale. It sounds like you guys are okay with that in the IG zone?
Yeah, you
want to pull them?
Guys, what do you think? John, what do you think? Let's go ahead. Let's go around and talk.
With using the IG. Okay. All right. All right. I'll make some categories and I'll bring the definitions for those so we all know what we're looking at.
What about the retail? That's the controversial one. What do people think?
Well, I'm up for limiting it, but I think 2 locations is limiting it.
It's more than enough.
Yeah, that's state law, right?
Right. The limitation by statute at this point is quite sufficient.
Yeah.
I think the idea of gateway drug is one of these booger fantasies that we come up with. I do not believe that to be true. It's a taxable vice, like cigarettes and alcohol. None of them are good for you. It is, as I said before, it's just a human condition to desire to be intoxicated at times. And it goes back to, primitive societies. So all we've gotten into is trouble by having stuff like this being illegal. It's made legal now, taxable, it's controllable, it's a good thing.
So do it up to the 2.
Yeah,
up to the 2.
Okay, keep it out of the town center in the BL, so it's ugly West Main anyways. Car dealership or marijuana, whatever.
Buy a car and drive slow.
Right. And fast food, right? Okay. Okay, so that's Joe. Anyone, what do...
Yeah, I agree with all that.
Okay.
That's a pretty good idea.
All right, that sounds like consensus to me. So I'll get more information on the processing, cultivating facilities and create some categories for them for the IG zone.
Okay.
Now, also, I did throw in by statute, you're allowed to look at separation distances between these uses and a variety of other uses, such as churches, public parochial schools, convents, charitable institutions, hospital, veterans' homes, and I think military installations. So I threw in everything except for the military installation. I think the only one we have is the Army Reserve Center out on the Guilford line, as far as I know. But there's the Army down here. There's the Army down, the state Army, right?
Mount Louise.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and see whether it's state or it's just U.S. military. I don't know if you want to do that.
How much of the separation? How many feet?
It's up to the commission. Other towns I've seen anywhere from 500 to 1,500 for liquor establishments, which I've seen it done for, and I've seen adult entertainment uses separated out also from those kinds of uses. So it's really judgment call on the commission's part.
I'd like to see it maximized because I've seen the effects of overuse of marijuana on mental health. And, I think there's studies that haven't, neurological aspects around marijuana use of, yes, maybe for cancer patients or health things, but I think there's also some real concern about, what it does to the brain of our youth before the brain's fully developed neurologically. And,
I've heard of those.
I've heard some things, if I can find them, I'll send you the podcast of.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's your call.
Yeah.
I think I want to hear the public, if there's strong views, I can be swayed. But yeah, I understand,
So,
whatever.
Does that sound like a consensus? You would like to keep the separation?
Yeah, keep a separation.
Okay.
And does that fall into, excuse me, I'm sorry. Does that fall into the categories of so we have package stores that sell alcohol and we have bars that sell alcohol and restaurants that sell alcohol? How is that going to be contained? Is it any different?
Well, we don't, other than the fact that my understanding is we don't have a definition for a bar. So my take is they're not allowed new ones. The ones that exist are allowed, for example, under a cafe license, which they usually our taverns license they operate under. Ones that are part of a restaurant, different story, that comes under a restaurant liquor license. Or you've got, the breweries, which are different too. But we have no separation distance. We have no anything for any of that stuff, as far as I know.
We don't.
The package stores are limited by, you can only have so many per population. I can't remember what it is. It's maybe something like 1 per 1,000 or a couple thousand maybe, because I think we looked at this in New London where, of course, they had maxed out the number of liquor stores per capita when I was there. And if one was going up, then another one could come in, but it was that tight. So I became aware of that, but there is a limit. I can't quote it off the top of my head, but other than that, I don't think we...
There's a state regulation. No separation stuff is in the state, and then you have the option of doing it locally, and we don't do it.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if the bars are going to be able to sell marijuana or be able to smoke marijuana within their bars or smoking facilities.
Well, without...
We're not allowed to smoke in
You need a
restaurants.
liquor license to sell liquors.
You need a marijuana license to get into the marijuana selling business.
Yeah, but it's a public resident who's not allowed to smoke, cigarettes in a restaurant. I would assume.
That's my understanding is the
it would be a
smoking is
similar-
smoking marijuana or tobacco, and it's prohibited in restaurants. That's my understanding. That's how it's going to be.
But they
Because of
do have
secondhand-
smoke shops, cigar shops, stuff like that is
Right, that's
Like
another
bring your
potential.
own marijuana and smoke it out
Well, that's
somewhere?
another potential use.
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know that. I know the statute, I think, provides for municipal control over smoking, for example, on town green and municipal property. So that's up to
I think that's why we need to stay ahead of the curve, get this all under control probably and do the best we can with whatever we got in front of us. And hopefully,
Whatever we can say, we get help for it.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest and understand.
Right. We need to do something else so that you can sell it everywhere. So we need to either, so we should do something.
All right, well, let me, there's the time, you can control time, and you can also control signage. So in the last page and a half, I proposed some controls for all that stuff.
Okay.
Good. Take a look, see what you think about it. We'll talk about it again in the meeting.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Okay, item number 3, time extension request.
You should have a letter in your packet.
From Metro Star.
Metro Star, they want a year on the...
That makes sense.
From Metro Star, and they only got a year, which is what the regulations provide for their earth moving approval. It took them a little bit of time to get through the state for the traffic control, state traffic authority. And they're, going away out there, they're developing, clearing, they're starting to build the first building in front, and they're just looking for another year.
Your motion to approve the time extension request for this? Motion by John, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Joe. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bond establishment for 85 Todd's Hill.
I'm going to turn this over to our zoning officer, maybe. Do you have the memos for the bond establishment? Oh, we don't have that yet. All right. So we're still working on those. So we're going to table those to our next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll table item 4, 85 Pottsville Road, and item 5, 135 Pottsville Road. Brings us to item number 6, definition of agricultural uses. Dylan, what do you got for us here?
Yeah, so this memo is regarding 125-133 Leeds Island Road. It's otherwise known as the Morningwood Firewood business. I'm preparing to send this property a notice of violation for the processing and sale of firewood and reiterating the previous zoning officer's notice of violation to this property. The previous zoning enforcement officer, Daniel Brennan, had issued a notice of violation to the above property on October 2nd, 2020, and stated that, quote, the property at hand is zoned residential R4, and the processing and sale of materials is not directly related to the agricultural use and is not an allowed use in the zone, end quote. However, I'm having difficulties finding references in the regulations in case the property owner appeals my notice of violation. So before I send the notice of violation, I am asking the commission for an interpretation as to whether or not the processing and sale of firewood from logged lumber off-site brought onto a property is considered to be an agricultural use or part of an agricultural use.
What's your opinion?
I mean, based on Dan's last notice of violation, I would say it's not. But I was having a hard time finding anything in the regulations that distinctly stated off-site, bringing lumber from off-site and processing it to sell was or was not an agricultural use. And I wouldn't want to send a property owner a notice of violation and, suggest that I might start issuing citations for an ongoing violation if it ends up being permitted.
Sure.
What about a sawmill that's a residential? Is that considered something different? I mean, still, you're processing wood, and you're selling mulch, you're selling firewood, or whatever. Is that instead? I don't know. That's a
Yeah, I'm not sure if.
So you're talking about the wood would be, to me, there might be a distinction between the wood grown on the property versus
but they
wood
bring
brought
it in.
in.
You only can.
Distinction between the wood grown on the property
Yeah.
and commercially bought wood.
Well, you bring it in. Eventually, you bring it in because you only can cut so much wood on
Well,
the
that's-
property
that's
before
the problem.
there's nothing left.
At some point,
Bring
does
it
it
in.
transition from agricultural to commercial?
Well, I suspect they're not harvesting wood from, they're just taking remnant wood that's from the hurricanes and, reusing a secondary,
No, well, I don't want to mention names. I'm mentioning Zuwalik. That's been there for, I don't know, a long time, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And now he doesn't have any wood. They go out and they bring in wood. And that's a processing. I mean, I don't know if that's residential area zoned there or not. I'm
but
not
where's
sure.
he getting the wood?
Where, I don't know where, but they bring it in. He doesn't cut wood, logs.
That doesn't bring truckloads.
Right, is
bring
it
in
fallen wood as a result of storms, somebody has a tree in their yard and
No, that's beyond that. Yeah,
Okay,
these are-
so then that's more
It's beyond that.
commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a business. They bring it in.
Well, the Zawaliks are grandfathered if it goes back 50 years.
Goes back, yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, go back past 56.
They're way past 50 years.
Manufacturing fire.
They're way before 56.
Before the
Buying
zoning
raw
regs,
product and cutting it
yeah.
up and dividing it.
Yeah.
You know, that's different than growing tomatoes in your backyard and putting a little stand out the front.
It's that production of it's the processing of
So
wood.
this is a
as opposed
big
to
product, a
processing
big
marijuana.
production that he's doing? I mean, he's
Oh,
bringing in...
it's huge. If you go down Leeds Island Road, I forgot the name of the church.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
But
they've been here.
it's across the street that the Brantford Gun Club is on.
Yeah.
It's,
Red Hill Road.
Oh, right there.
On the right.
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
It's massive.
Oh, that's residential? That's not permitted for him to be able to do that?
It's R4.
So if I was his neighbor, I'd be pretty upset, hearing that all day long.
I'm getting complaints from the neighbors,
Yeah.
and this goes back years. And in 2020, Dan Brennan was issuing notices of violation to them, and he threatened citations against them, saying, if you don't clean this up, you're going to get a $150 fine every single day that this violation persists. And I did the math, and
right now, the property owner would owe almost $50,000 in fines.
So he has been issued cease and desist, and he has not stopped?
Yes.
So that you just want to issue another one?
Yes.
Shouldn't he just come in for a zone change to a business use? Isn't it closer?
Yeah, but that's not, I don't think that area lends itself to rezoning.
I don't know how far down it is. It seems like it's like he's closer to,
Right.
where the motel is and
I don't think he's that close to that, no.
I mean, how far down are we
He's
going?
further down.
Oh,
It's
he's-
past the church, right there
okay.
past the
he's
church.
further
It's
down.
actually starting to get, it's kind of pretty.
Can he
It's starting
screen
to
it?
get pretty that.
Can he screen it with evergreen trees?
So, the property itself is really large. Where you could see the wood from the street, the property itself goes much farther back than what you're able to see.
I drive that road all the time and I never see
You
it.
don't think there's a way to
You
screen
never,
it?
I've never, yeah.
you gotta turn your head that way and you'll see it clear as
I
day.
don't know.
It's just for some reason you
I
don't
feel
turn
like it
off
would be
that area.
possible.
You're looking straight, it's right before a bend, you know?
If people didn't see it, would they feel better? The neighbors not seeing the stack of wood?
The one neighbor in particular that I'm getting a complaint from lives like a quarter mile down the street. Like they're not
Noise
even
issue, right? Or
Well,
is there?
you're bringing in big trucks then, right?
Yeah.
That's, yeah, it's like you're.
And you got dump trucks delivering wood loads to people and all that.
They're a delivery service. They have signs posted all over the property that you are not allowed to go on that property. Like no one can go there. It's a strictly delivery-based business, it appears.
So they're hauling in big wood, they're cutting it down, and then they're selling it off as firewood?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Wait, so that's a residential property
In a
or is it a
residential.
commercial?
It's residential.
It's commercial use in a residential property.
Yeah.
Agricultural uses are allowed uses in residential property.
Yes.
So that's his claim.
So, yeah, is it an
Claim, this is an agricultural use, you allow that as in the residential zone. You have farm or residential zone, this is agricultural use. That would be his claim.
And is it agriculture because it's a tree?
I guess
tree,
so,
it's
but
not
the idea of going off-site, getting a product and fixing, that's almost like manufacturing, cutting it, doing stuff to it, and then selling it, that doesn't sound like an agricultural use. I agree that if you were cutting your own trees or something, you're doing your own forestry operation, it sounds a stretch.
I would counter, though, that agricultural uses traditionally will take things grown in other places and process them on site, whether it's silage, whether it's hay, whether it's,
Right.
Even things they grow on their own site are frequently processed in order to sell, take to market. I think if the entitlement to do it is one thing. I feel he is entitled to do it. I don't feel he's entitled to make nuisance noise.
Why do you think he's entitled to do it? You can you take some things because it's wood.
Well,
because it's stuff that's grown in the ground. It seems like
Well, how about this example? You have cows.
The examples you gave.
What if you have a farm of cows and you take the dairy and you want to process and start to distribute ice cream on site? Is that considered an agricultural use?
That's a farm. To me, farm
But
is.
you've got a business use on that farm, like he's got a business
you can sell
use.
your crops. That's a commercial.
But the difference is he can't grow more trees fast enough to keep up with his sales.
Well, let's say you have the dairy and you start making ice cream with the milk from the cows on the farm.
Right.
And then it gets bigger and all of a sudden you get rid of the cows and all you do is take milk
Bring in
milk and you got a big plant and it's making ice cream.
That's where it becomes, I think that's the distinction is,
that's the
if you're
line.
not generating the product on the land, it changes the classification. I think that's where I'm kind of concluding.
Yeah, I don't. It proves too much, Joe. That example that you gave, it seems to me anything that's grown, that I could say it's an agricultural use if I do something to it and sell it.
But the thing is, if you're doing something with hay, you're regrowing hay.
It comes from the site.
Yeah, it's coming from the
You're
site.
bringing the raw product onto his land, prepping it by cutting it, stacking it.
What if I make little ships out of it? I do some design work to it and then sell that. Is it still an agricultural use? Because you're taking something and you're doing something to it and then selling it again. So what if I make something, I make I make one of these, and I start selling hammers. And then,
Yeah, but
okay, that's an agricultural use.
As long
because
as you're
it's made
growing
out of
the wood, as long as you're growing
that's
that
the
wood
argument.
on your property, to me, it's agricultural. If you're importing the wood to the property.
Correct. I'll go with that distinction. But,
That's why I brought up the cows. Like, if your cow's making the milk, and it turns into a, thriving ice cream business, but you still have those cows, to me, it's agriculture. If you take the cows off and bring in, and that's the issue with the trees. You can only grow so many trees in such a period of time, which controls the level of
activity.
Is he retailing the wood right from the property, or is he delivering it to retailers?
He's delivering it to residences. So they have a business Facebook page. So the person who owns the business is not the person who owns the property.
That's interesting.
Does he rent the property?
I believe so. I'm not sure, but they have reviews on Better Business Bureau. They're on Facebook.
He's running a business.
Does he have a business license to be able to retail this stuff?
I've looked on Concord and I can't find anything on Concord.
Okay. So you don't have a business license. Is he getting taxed?
I'm not sure. But
how about his equipment? Is equipment getting taxed? Brantford loves to tax construction equipment.
What really brought it on was, I was looking at Dan's old letter, and Dan's letter stated that the property is zoned R4 and the processing and sale of materials not directly related to the agricultural use is not an allowed use in the zone. And I couldn't find anything in the regulations that distinctly stated I don't know where he was getting that statement from. Like, why was he stating that it wasn't directly related to the agricultural use allowed in that zone? And then I tried to figure out, okay, what agricultural uses are allowed in an R4, and it just...
I don't think we define that, though.
There is no definition.
To me, and maybe I'm incorrect, but to me, an agricultural use is something that's generated from the land that you're on. Or grown, or fed, or whether it's chickens, or, plants, or, if I start growing shrubs and want to sell shrubs, I can... I could have a perennial farm and sell the perennials. To me, that's still agricultural use. But when you're talking about, a tree that needs 50 years to grow and you can't replenish it, so maybe initially, if you have, 50 acres of trees, you might have an agricultural use. But to me, the minute you start bringing in the trees that maintain that business, it's sort of
term,
and he's using that terminology.
The term agricultural uses is also used in table uses for commercial zones, and it enumerates 4 uses that are agricultural uses, which are commercial nurseries and greenhouses. This isn't that. Farms. This isn't a farm. Farm stands. It's not a farm stand. Farmers market. I don't think it comes within any of those either. I mean, I don't know if that exhausts the category of agricultural uses. You could argue it wasn't, but I don't, it just seems to me to be kind of a stretch. And I know the term agricultural is very broadly defined in the state statutes, but the state statutes aren't controlling here. I think this is more a common understanding. I don't know. I think the other thing that influences me is that the guy's already been issued a cease and desist. Yeah. And if you were to change your mind, you're like saying Dan was wrong. I mean, there is some precedent for having done this. And he didn't appeal it. I mean, he just ignored it. And I don't know. I get you why you're asking, but I think that there's, I don't know, it does seem a stretch for all the reasons Marcy said, whatever, that they're just not using anything grown on site.
You want me to read the definition on the computer?
Sure.
It's a citation, the property owner or
the property owner.
So if I look up what constitutes an agricultural use, my Google says agriculture is defined to include horticulture, fruit growing, seed growing, dairy farming, the breeding and keeping of livestock, including any creature kept for the production of food, wool, skins, or for fur, or for the purpose of its use in farming the land. The use of the land as grazing land, meadow, it kind of goes on, but it's not talking about trees necessarily.
It kind of follows the definition of farm, because there is a definition.
Right.
don't think you're much closer.
So
Keep going.
so you would agree,
Yes.
so you would agree that I should move forward with the letter?
But if you were to legally pursue this, what grounds would you be working on? That's what, how stable are you in your argument? Chuck would know, have a better, because it's such a fine line, gray area there.
Well, I mean, I think it's really up to the commission because you're the interpreter of the regulations. So if you interpret it as what seems to be the consensus, which is where Dan Brennan was coming from, then he can go forward based on the consensus of the commission, defining agriculture as excluding bringing in logs for processing, logs from offsite to process on a property for commercial sale.
I mean, to me, the only exception.
If that's what your consensus is.
To me, the only exception to bringing on materials is if you're bringing on material that's already fallen naturally. You have a hurricane and he's taking something that would go to the dump and fill a dump and repurposing it. To me, that's...
I don't think that even comes into play here because it would be sold. Maybe they do that, but that would be such a small percentage possibly of what's going on because it's such a high volume.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
And they have a business and they're selling this stuff and it's in a residential area. I think it's pretty good.
He just needs to find a new place to lease.
Yeah.
Well, is that a fair consensus? I mean, I think there's some other opinions, but it seems like, I'm not trying to count heads here, but...
Equipment on the land, like Midland Farms has a big machine, you put a log in it, it's like one end and it comes out all chopped up at the other. Does he have that kind of operation? Or just do it with a splitter?
He has to. I mean, they deliver like large fabric bags filled with just, I'm assuming it's a cord of wood. Just a really large bag of cut, processed firewood.
But what I'm saying is when he gets the raw product, the tree trunks delivered, like a Midland Farm, he's got a big machine right out there. They put the log on top. It could be 25, 30 feet long.
Yeah, you bring them in like a telephone pole.
Like telephone. And this machine cuts it and I think splits it. So you end up with a pile of split wood at the end of the machine.
I would have to assume that equipment's there. I mean, I can't see it from the street, and I can't get onto the property to...
I did see it, remember seeing that, and he has, you can't do that by hand no other way. He probably has a few machines with the amount of logs that he has.
Really?
I've seen logs that are 3-4 feet in circumference, massive. So
I'm just thinking about the size
cold-stone
of
business, it's just,
That's exactly right.
Well, what's the conclusion?
That it's not agricultural use.
Okay.
We should continue.
I think I count 1, 2, 3, 4.
And it can't
five
be
at least,
converted,
so,
this piece, into
six,
a producing, a business. But is it not zoned for...
Well, I'm curious if he's getting taxed on the equipment.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't mind. I love when people make a living and, he's making a clean living.
But honestly, that's where it becomes beyond sustainable. It's not like he's repurposing wood and it's a mom and pop kind of farm stand. He's making a living. And
yeah, I mean, he can be making a living and still not paying taxes.
And then there's the other guy who does have to pay the taxes for.
And I mean, what's to say that the guy down the road with some property should, that's a good idea. Let me start doing this. They said, the town is okay with it. And now all of a sudden we have all these residential, areas with certain land amount that start doing business. It's like, that guy's doing it, And Chuck, you hear that a lot from people. Well, I seen it done over there. And like, that was before our laws. Well, now we have laws. And if we don't, we should put them in place and sort of figure this out.
Well, it sounds like if that's the consensus, then you've got something in place. It's deciding this is not an agricultural use, and that covers the situation. Is that a fair statement?
I think
based
so.
on the majority of the commission?
I mean,
I agree with that.
Okay.
Does anybody disagree?
Okay. Fair enough. Have what you need?
It's no fun. I don't have what I need.
Great.
thank you.
Okay, what else we got?
We're moving ahead with the affordable housing plan, so I have a committee pretty much finalized, and I'm waiting for approval of the contract for signature, and then we're ready to go with a kickoff meeting probably later this month, hopefully. So again, just to recap, we need to get this in place by, I believe, June. So be developed over the fall and early spring, and then it's going to go through an approval process.
You said you have a committee?
Yeah.
Who's the committee?
Well, it hasn't met yet or been established, so we've just got people to agree.
You can't announce it, is that what you're saying?
No, I just don't remember every single name off the top of my head. I don't have the piece of paper, so I remember most of them. I just don't want to slight anybody. But I'll provide all the names for the commission at the next meeting, just so you know.
Just curious.
Yeah, Chuck and I,
Yeah, I think Joe is
Joe is on it, and the chair of the Housing Authority has agreed to be on it. Let's see, Peter Semino, who's the Director of Counseling Services, agreed to be on it. We've got a pastor from one of the local churches. We've got someone from the Community Foundation who's also been attending the monthly meetings at SCROG. I think 2 people on the Community Foundation have agreed to be on it. And I think there's one other person I'm forgetting for some reason. Maybe that's it. But I'll bring all the names to you at the next meeting.
Okie doke. Anything else, Harry?
There are a lot of other things going on, but, we have a lot of potential applications in the wings. I won't go through all of them, but it could be a pretty busy fall. There's some fairly large projects, in addition to Summit Place Part 3 just came in. So it's going to be busy, I think. We'll see what happens.
What's happening with the property at the end of Meadow and Monteluise that was approved and has been in litigation? Are we going to see another application on that?
You're talking about Atlantic Wharf?
Atlantic Wharf.
Atlantic Wire Company?
Yeah.
They're still active, so they have an active approval. So the master plan is still active, and the site plan approval is still active from, things were changed and approved to extend those approvals. I hear there's a court date, but I haven't, I don't know what that is, and I don't know if, how close they are to resolving the issue.
I guess that's what my question is. If they can resolve the issue, then they'd be able to, then...
The plan's been revised. They're basically ready to go as long as, the property closes and the developer is in control of the property.
I guess I thought that the issue related to the developer's ability to build that plan.
No.
I thought it was
nothing to do with the
who's got
developer's
to clean it
ability
up.
to do it.
That's what I
So it's just a money issue.
I think it was just, that's what I heard.
I thought it had something to do with the elevation of the level of cleanup, and if...
There may be more nuances I don't know about, but there are court documents, and some of those, I believe most of that's public off the state website. So
and it's all hearsay. I just...
Yeah.
That was why I asked the question, because I wasn't sure if the plan that we approved was viable.
As far as I know, the plan that was approved is still the plan the developer wants to go ahead with.
Okay.
As far as I know, yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's enough.
Great. So I want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Brantford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BrantfordTV.org.